In today's lesson, we are going to learn about the string class. The string class is a very useful class by Java to help us work with anything that is not a number. So it allows us to have a series of characters and save that series of characters, spaces, punctuation as a single variable. Alrighty, let's first talk about creating objects. Now, a variable itself can either hold a primitive data type, and recall that primitive data types are, for example, int, double, boolean. We learned about those the other day. Those are primitive data types because those come from Java. They're predefined with the language. Or we can have what's called a reference to a specific object. And we're going to talk a lot more about that later in the weeks to come. However, for right now, just understand that a reference to an object is much more sophisticated than a primitive data type. Now, a class name can be used to declare an object reference variable. So in this case, string is the class and title is the variable name. And in this case, I am declaring a variable. It is essentially ready so that I can save stuff with it. So I can, save data there. And the reference variable holds the address of an object. And this is where the computer will go to actually get the data that the object contains. Now, the actual object itself has to be created separately. Now, I know this is kind of a weird concept. However, the way that I like to think about it is this is a lot like if you were to buy blank land to build a house. Just because you bought a plot of land does not mean that the house magically appears. You need to construct it or build it. And that's what we will see when we work with objects. When we create objects, we use the word new to create a new object. Now, the only exception to that are strings. Strings are a little bit different than everything else. Strings come from the Java library, and we are allowed to manipulate them a little bit easier than we can with typical objects. But in general, when you create a new object, you have to say that the variable name is equal to new. This right here is our constructor. And again, it is the method giving the instructions as to how to create the new string. And then the part that we see here inside the parentheses are any parameters that are needed to define the object with. When we create an object, we call that process instantiation. So we can say that we instantiated an object. We can say that every object is an instance of a particular class. So you'll hear that word instantiated quite a bit. And it essentially means that you initialized it, you built the object and got it ready to go. It's possible to have many instances of something. For example, if we were talking about dogs, we could have a golden retriever, we could have a yellow lab, we could have a poodle. Those are all instances of different types of dogs. Now, because strings are so common, like I said a minute ago, we don't have to use the new operator to create a string object. We can simply just say the variable name equals and then use the double quotes to contain the string. And this special syntax only works for strings. Once the string object has been instantiated, or any object for that matter, we can use the dot operator or dot notation to invoke the methods. Now, invoke is a fancy word for call. So essentially saying I'm going to call the methods that the object is allowed to use. This right here is an example of the method. Title is the variable name of the object, and the dot is essentially saying who is calling what. So what this notation says when we look at it is the variable title, which is a string, wants to call the method called length, which belongs to the string class. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this string. Let's say I were to create a string variable. So first of all, notice here the first word that is that comes first is the type of object I'm creating. So right now I am creating a string reference. Okay, so it's a reference to a string variable. The variable name is my name, and then this part right here are the contents of that string. Now, if I were to look at this string here has a length of 11 characters. And when we count characters, characters are going to be your letters, spaces, punctuation, etc. etc. Basically, anything that you would hit on the keyboard is a character. Now, when I look at this, I can number my characters. So all characters index starting at 0. So this is 0, 1, 2, the period is 3, the space is 4, the D for Dena is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So, oh shoot, did I count wrong? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so this actually has a length of 10 characters. I don't want to redo my video. Length of 10 characters. And the indices for the strings go from 0 to length minus 1. So that's why they go from 0 to 9. Excuse my typo, sorry. And the string class has a lot of built-in methods for us to use. And in order to use these methods, we have to understand how the string is made up. And the most important thing to remember is that we always start at 0. And pretty much everything with programming is going to start with 0. That is a common trend. It is commonly forgotten, but that is very common in most programming languages that the counting starts with 0. Okay. So many of these methods are going to do what's called return a value, which is essentially sending back information to the calling program. Okay, what does that mean? So let's say, for example, I called on you and I asked you a question, and then you gave me an answer. So you returned information back to me in the form of an answer. Well, when we're working with methods, we typically call a method for two reasons. The first reason would be to perform an action. The second reason would be to get information. So if I'm just performing an action, I might not be returning any information. And so methods that don't return anything are void methods. So these methods don't return anything. And if you notice, when we call our main method, that method is a void method. It says public static void main, essentially saying that that method returns nothing. So that method just does something. And in our case for main, it runs the program. Other methods might return something. For example, they might return an integer, or they might return a string. And that would be whatever value is being returned back to whoever called the method. In Java, we can only return one item. There is a complete list of string methods in our book on page 78, and I also created a PDF of this, which is in Schoology. And if we look at the string methods.pdf handout, you'll see more examples of our string methods. So I would encourage you to pull that up and look at that before class. Okay, the most common string method that people use wrong is substring. So I'm going to walk through that one here in the video. Now you'll notice as we look at what we have here, first of all, we have our class header, which is right here. So this is our class header, and this file is called practice.java. Then here we see our method header. And notice, like I mentioned, the use of that word void, basically saying that this method returns nothing. And then string args, this is a parameter. Again, we don't need to know what it's used for. It's just required in order to run. Now here, this is where I am creating a string. And if we were to number these indices, just like we did a minute ago, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I now have my string. So what we're going to do is go through each of these lines and see what exactly would be output. So in the first one, when I say println and I say my name, I'm printing the variable. So what Java does is it says, okay, you want to print. What is it that you want to print? Oh, you want to print the variable my name. So then Java will now go to the variable my name and see what it's equal to. And this information would be inserted into the print line, and that is what is displayed. So what I would see on the screen is simply Mrs. Dena. Now, if we look at these next two lines, we will see dot substring with 2 parameters and dot substring with 1 parameter. Okay, let's take a look at how the substring method works. If we pull up that extra handout that I mentioned to you, which I have right here, we can see several different methods that are available to us. And down here at the bottom, we can see the 2 substring methods. And so if we look at this description, it says returns a new string that is a subset of this string, starting at index offset and ending with the character at position end index -1. Okay, the other one just says returns a new string that starts at index offset and extends to the end of the string. So what we see here, this is an example of something called method overloading, which we will talk about later in the year. And it's where we have multiple methods with the same names that have different parameter lists. And so the compiler will determine which one to use based on what parameters we gave. So if when we call this method we use 2 parameters, this first method will be called. If we call 1 parameter, the second method will be called. All right, so let's go back and see how that will work out. So when I see substring 2 to 7, that is saying that I want to start here and go up to, but not include 7. So that's essentially going to take characters 2 through 6. So that would take the S all the way to the E in Dena. So that would print S period space DE. Now the next one says that it is going to start at index 4, and since it's only 1 parameter, it will start at 4 and go till the end. So this one is going to start at the space, so I'm just going to put that to show a space, and then we'll print the Dena. And then the last one says it starts at 2, so just like our first example, and it goes to myname.length. Now this right here is a method call that will pull the length of the string. And this string has a length of 10 characters. It goes from index 0 to 9, but it has a length of 10. So right now, this current method call looks like 2, 10, which means it will start at 2 and go all the way up to the end number -1, which is index 9. So this will print S period space DENNA. And substring is one of those methods we really need to get a handle on. Tomorrow in class, we will go ahead and play around with all the different methods, and then we will have worksheet 2 for homework. We do have a mini quiz coming up in another day or 2, so it's a good time to start looking over all your notes, maybe rewatching videos, and making sure you understand everything that we've learned so far. All right, have a nice day.